As editor-in-chief of Package Design magazine, I speak with some of the most brilliant thought leaders in the design, branding, and marketing of consumer packaged goods. Through the generous support of our sponsors, we bring these experiences to you. This video series explores what inspires these thought leaders and their insights on the collaborative design process as a strategic business competence. I'm Linda Casey, and this is Package Design Matters. We've seen that collaboration is so important to the success of many branding and marketing and package design projects. And what's interesting about you, Rich, is that you have this distinctive experience, this distinctive background. You've been on the agency side, you're of course on the brand side, you're on the brand side now, and you've even been on the manufacturing side. How does the breadth of your experience inform and educate your innovation and design work?
That's a great question. I've been very fortunate to have a very diverse career path so far. As you said, I started in the consultancy world over in the UK, and then ended up working in the spirits world in Italy, and then ended up here in the US working for a number of different consultancies here in the Chicago area. And what I found from working on some of those initiatives, some of the feedback I was receiving was the frustration from in design projects going through into manufacturing, and that these solutions were on paper very eye-catching, creative solutions, but some of them were unmanufacturable. And that's an integral part in getting a product to market. What you don't want to do is design something that then goes on down a filling line that slows that line speed down because certain elements aren't designed correctly. And then this was really spearheaded by something I heard when I was meeting with a guy called At Willits at Brown-Forman, and his frustrations with the solutions that he was getting in high-end spirits from various agencies around the world that were beautiful designs, but his frustrations that those designs would then have to go back through the engineering funnel to be able to be manufactured effectively. And then, so I proactively found an opportunity for me to migrate into a company that was a manufacturing platform. So I was exposed to a plethora of different manufacturing techniques. I was enabled me to experience, get one-on-one experience in how products are manufactured, understanding the manufacturing process from materials to filling, those sort of experiences that then I could take back to the design drawing board.
Being able to understand what the retailer wants and needs, that's something that is essential for a product success. How can designers and marketers have a more collaborative relationship with retail buyers?
Yeah. We've noticed this year that that relationship with the retailer is paramount to a brand's success. It's understanding that retailers have a positioning in the marketplace to get those consumers into their establishments. So it's really aligning your product or your brand in synergy with the positioning of the retailer.
The consumer world was once static. We then came to understand the role of a brand. In turn, the world has changed. With the foundation of observations, insights, strategy, collaboration, and extraordinary ideas, design serves as the conduit for a brand. Without design, what purposes do these efforts serve?
And a great example of partnering with a retailer was this project here, which was the development of the wine cube for Target. And this started off as an innovations initiative. It was really looking at a category that was fairly stagnant. There wasn't a lot of innovation in the wine category in terms of maybe some innovation around the development of synthetic corks. But this project started as a pure innovations initiative, in that we looked at the wine industry and different usage occasions. How could we innovate in the way that wine is perceived and the way that wine is purchased? So we looked at different usage occasions for wine, and that could have been from single serve dosage to business lunch opportunities, to gifting opportunities, to targeting to millennial parties, picnics, that sort of thing, portability. And we presented that innovation document to a number of key wine producers on the West Coast. Some of them embraced it, some of them didn't embrace it. But it turned to one particular wine producer really embracing the idea of creating a format, to breaking kind of category conventions and getting away from the single format, and creating a format that could accommodate a much larger volume of product. It also was directed around breaking consumers' perception of wine and the way that we consume wine, or the way that we purchase and consume it. And looking at wine formats in different global markets. I'd worked on a number of wine brands in the UK, one being Stolls of Chelsea, that was actually the number one at the time, the number one wine brand in the UK. And that brand actually started in a boxed wine format and then migrated into bottles.
Interesting.
So it was taking that learning from the UK market and also the Australian market with regard to the boxed wine format, breaking those conventions and integrating it into the US market. We did a number of ethnographic studies. At the time that we started, the wine producer that we were working with hadn't defined a retail partner. It turned out to be Target. But we then started working with the in-house Target design team. And as I said, we did some ethnographic studies. We looked at, what is the most efficient shape in terms of consumer experience. So we did a lot of ethnographic studies. We looked at what format was already in existence, and at the time it was what we dubbed the cereal box. And it was a bit of a dysfunctional format, because if you wanted your wine chilled in a boxed format, the only way you could store it would be in the door. And so then the only way that you could then dispense it was to remove it from the fridge, dispense it, and then put the box back. The beauty of the cube is it was beautifully in its most efficient shape, fitting in the back of the fridge. You could dispense it and without removing it. From a retail perspective, retailers love this shelf. As I said, it's the most efficient shelf shape. I mean, you know, from a format perspective, you know, you're not wasting any.
From a cube utilization
Yeah.
standpoint, a cube obviously is got to be the most efficient. So definitely, the retailers loved it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it resonated so well with new wine drinkers?
Because again, it broke that convention around the way that we consumed wine, and the sort of this an elite perspective around wine.
So do you think it was one of the first formats to help democratize wine?
Absolutely. I mean, it redefined the category in that it broke down those barriers, and it made wine much more accessible. I mean, it made it more accessible in the fact that boxed wine in the US was a faux pas. It was considered low quality. It was considered, you know, budget. You know, in blind tasting, these particular wines outperformed 90 different bottles in conventional glass.
And, you know, being from the design side and understanding package design, it's for us in the industry, it was so frustrating because we saw the benefits of boxed wine. We saw that it was able to remove the oxygen evacuation,
Exactly.
and you don't have to worry about cork taint, none of those things with the boxed wine, but yet the consumers were not resonating with boxed wine for all the reasons that you said. It literally was the butt of jokes in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you certainly wouldn't, one, you wouldn't want to be seen at one at home.
We live in a fast-changing digital world. Dynamic communication and social expression influence just about everything we do. Business is digital. Impact is instant. Brands and customers interact in amazing new ways. From postage stamps to packaging and billboards, HP's Graphic Solutions business is leading these transformations, creating innovative digital print technologies that enable more effective, engaging communication between brands and end users.
And it really did. I mean, it redefined the category. The CEO of Target was quoted in saying it was one of the most successful product launches of the time.
Oh my gosh.
And it got into, out of super Target stores, it was in the top 5 selling items across all categories. So, you know, you add all your essentials, toothpaste, soap, it was in the top 5.
I wouldn't think wine in general would have made the top 5, and the fact that this was in the top 5 of every category is pretty amazing. And there was some feedback that you had received that not only were these wine cubes accepted and considered kind of on par with bottles, they actually became kind of hip.
Absolutely. I was told that it became sort of an underground movement, that they were like boxed wine parties around this brand, which was quite unbelievable.
That's great. And be able to introduce wine also to maybe a whole new group of of consumers. Maybe some newer drinkers who are used to drinking beer and hard liquor, but maybe felt intimidated by wine as a newer drinker.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the initial design brief from the Target in-house design team was, imagine you're designing a wine format for IKEA, make it very utilitarian every day. Make the wine experience about enjoying it on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to it being more of a special occasion.
And that democratization of wine is something that you're kind of in a position again to do, because your brand that you work with now is trying to bring natural hair care to the masses.
Absolutely, there's definite synergies there. Renpure is, a brand that is in the natural aisle. It's a natural product that is all about stripping away the chemicals you find in conventional hair care. When we make that an integral part of our message on the front of our label, that we dub it our zero statement. And it's something that really resonates. We're finding it really resonates with our consumer, that we're really focusing on delivering a much cleaner product.
Something is happening. The familiar barcode is touching everything. Every surface, every sound, every image. Imperceptible to you, yet it's clear to sensors like your smartphone. All things have become their own channels. This is the engine driving the Internet of Things. This is Digimarc.
So I had picked up my rosemary mint cleansing conditioner at Target because I love that little sections, the little sections they have at Target that speak to different consumer philosophies. And this is where I've discovered the cleansing conditioner, and it really is part of my whole Target experience. And it's interesting as a consumer that I do this because it's something that you, as a designer and an innovator, have been watching. You've been watching and kind of working with the whole idea of retailers using product for their own branding.
Right. What we've noticed is that some of the relationships we have had with our retailers have been incredibly successful by us understanding their positioning and synergizing our product offering with those retailers. And if there's that synergy, then there's much greater collaboration between brand and retailer.
Yeah, and having that collaboration between the brand and the retailer enable you to not only break the categories as you've done with Wine Cube and introduce new consumers to products such as you did with me, with the cleansing conditioner, but it also helps in your innovation, because you had talked a little bit about how your queue of innovations and how you work on new product development and test new products is also benefits from this knowledge and your expertise in navigating that retail buyer brand relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been very fortunate in that. In some of the projects that I've been working with in my career, developing partnerships and relationships with retailers that allow us to test product, just to get some form of consumer feedback. Mm-hmm. And it's in a way, it's a way for us to redefine the way that we do consumer research. Gone are the days of creating sterile environments and putting consumers in rooms with product and asking them kind of questions around certain products and experiences.
You don't put them in the 4 white walls with someone with a dry erase board?
Did any of those work? You know, and I've worked on other projects with retailers. You know, we went through this phase of the whole pop-up store era. I developed with a major surface cleaning manufacturer a pop-up store around a brand to really gauge consumer feedback. And this was purely around a new product development. And it enabled the brand owner to really test product with consumers in a very controlled environment, but not a sterile environment, not the conventional way of doing research.
Okay, so I had no idea that you had done this pop-up store work and be able to do some testing of product that way. What a great branding vehicle, and what did working at a pop-up store teach you about what retailers need?
Well, you know, it was, you know, there's this barrier between product on the shelf and the consumer experience.
Okay.
And so this enabled consumers to interact with the product firsthand prior to purchase. You know, really understand how the product worked, how it really performed, because that was obviously, you know, a paramount piece in the product's success.
How do you test performance in a pop-up store? Did you have a performance area?
This particular product was, you know, it was a great piece of innovation, and it was around stylizing, customizing floor patterns or patterns on rugs or carpets.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
So it was like this stenciling of. It was basically taking a stenciling format and applying it to decorating and customizing your living space for rugs and carpets.
Talk about an innovative idea.
And so it enabled, this pop-up store enabled consumers to really interact with this product firsthand, test it out, see how it performed, just go through the actual application process and really get an understanding of what the potential was with this particular product.
Yeah, the potential and to get ambassadors for the product because visitors to pop-up stores.
Exactly. Get some form of following around the product prior to launch, because this was purely an exercise to get this consumer feedback, because this was new product development, new innovation. Really get that kind of data firsthand from consumers prior to launch. You know, and what could be improved on, what could be changed in terms of product formulation, consistency. You know, because basically, you know, you were laying down some form of dye or ink onto fabric for you to create these patterns.
Amazing. One of the characteristics that I see in a lot of very successful designers and innovators like yourself is this idea of not limiting your design skills and your design education and training to what you apply it to. And it's absolutely amazing to see how you've taken your design background and applied it to product innovation. How has design thinking help you become a better innovator?
You know, one of the processes that I really embrace in the design process is looking outside the category domain or a category domain that I might be working in. What I try to do is learn from other categories and trends within those categories and try and instill those into hair care. So, you know, we've mentioned before about the beverage category and how fast moving the beverage category in terms of new product development. You know, and some of those trends have migrated into hair care. You know, we've seen, you know, the emergence of superfruits and how superfruits have really defined a section of the beverage category and how that's now migrating into hair care. Also the huge success of coconut water in beverage and how that now is one of the core kind of competencies that is the makeup of what we're developing now in Renpure. You know, we're seeing a huge emergence of coconut-based products in our portfolio, and that's based on, you know, trends in other categories that then migrate cross-category.
Being able to use some of these ingredients in food that are kind of safe to consume and people feel comfortable with, I imagine frees you up as far as how you test your product for use with consumers.
Exactly. I mean, you know, consumers are far more readily going to embrace a product or a hair care product that they're going to put on their body if they're already comfortable in it being in the food category, that they're ingesting it that way. So you know, there's already that inherent comfort from a consumer's perspective, that, you know, the familiarity. You know, and we've noticed that, you know, there's definitely a very different formula that we're having to address from developing product for mass versus developing product for professional. You know, mass is all about familiarity. You know, there are the early adopters, but those early adopters are few and far between. You know, it's the consumer that is just buying based on familiarity and comfort. Professional is the complete opposite. You know, what we're finding in professional is that consumers want the latest innovation when it comes to product development. They want these new innovative product inventions in hair care. You know, and they're willing to pay a premium for those innovations. So.
And when we talk about, you know, the ingredients, we talk about the retailers and how things are different as far as product formulation and innovation. It kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about knowing your retailers, because in the premium market, the hair salon is an assisted sale, whereas mass is not.
Yeah, I mean, mass is, yeah, exactly. And mass is all about, you know, being informed, you know, recommendation, trial, whereas professional, it's easier to get product information over to the consumer, because yes, we have what we call the influencer being either the stylist or the beauty advisor that is very, very familiar with the technologies based around a particular product, which, you know, you don't have that luxury on the mass retail side. You know, you have to tell that story on the actual package. You know, and that's why you see a lot of professional products, you know, they're super minimal, there's not much of a story, you know, it's all about super high-end aesthetic. Whereas product in the mass retail section has to really, really work hard to portray and tell that story.
And storytelling definitely seems to be a big part of the brand that you're working with now. It seems that being able to kind of tell the story of the brand, tell the story of the people behind the brand, and other things that they stand for. And that is all such a big part of the branding and marketing. It's got to be a bit of a challenge for you when it comes to package design, because how do you make sure that package design is part of that content marketing story, or do you?
Well, I mean, part of the content marketing story is really about focusing on the ingredients, the core ingredients in the formulations. But there is definitely the side of the marketing story that really focuses on the fact that the brand is family owned and operated. There's 3 generations of family in Renpure, with over 30 years of experience in the hair care industry. So there's very distinct story around the family, the legacy that is being continued, the knowledge not only in the hair care industry, but building these relationships with key retailers.
Definitely building the relationships with the key retailers, with the manufacturers, the ingredient suppliers, having all that to kind of rely on with the family, but also the family brought in some of their own values into the brand in the way that they conduct their business and even the way that they test their product.
Absolutely. Again, there's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, kind of cheeky message on the back of the package that is 100% genuine. But it says that these products are not tested on animals; they're tested on the Redmonds. So a lot of the products are tested by the family prior to going into the retail channels.
You've been able to rethink these different types of brand experiences because you really are a bit of a brand experience junkie. So tell me about your addiction to trial.
Oh, well, I somewhat consider myself an early adopter, one of these people that want to trial new product, and that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. Specifically in beverage, going back to, I know we've talked about this before, but for me, beverage is such a hotbed of ideas in terms of new product development and learnings. We saw the success of vitamin water and how that became almost a household name. And it wasn't really reinventing the wheel. It wasn't so much something that was so unfamiliar to us. It was a familiar format, in terms of product, in terms of formulation. It was just the communication was different. The communication around the product was different. And consumers were, I guess at the time, really yearning for something new in that category.
Yeah, being able to develop a product that's new in a different type of format and having kind of a vitamin that you could drink versus a pill that'd be difficult to swallow. This was going to be a positive experience. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was breaking down those negative experiences, consumer experiences about ingesting vitamins, and creating a completely different product format. Yeah, just talking about product format migration. You think you mentioned pouches and where their origins come from. Pouches were developed in the food category. And now you'll see pouches in hair care. You know, we're developing product now in paquettes and sachets, which your familiar territory would be back in food, in food condiments. So we definitely see that migration of formats between categories, which really makes consumers' interaction much more familiar.
Definitely, and having that familiar interaction is helpful, but sometimes it's best to kind of say the hell with familiarity and try something new. I know that one of the inspirations that you often come to took a category that seems a little pedestrian and reinvented it.
One of the inspirations that I've taken is the cleaning category, and how Dyson reinvented and broke consumer behavior. Really understood consumer frustrations around that particular format, and through his engineering background, redefined that experience by removing the bag. The bag was not a pleasant experience in cleaning floors, and so re-engineering the vacuum around that premise of eliminating that process, he really elevated his product offering, as well as developing something far more aesthetically pleasing. He completely changed that consumer experience. It was something very design oriented, and then generated a higher price point.
What innovations have you seen that have failed in the last decade, and what can we learn from them?
I don't think it's one that really comes to mind isn't so much a failure, but it's how technology has changed our social interaction with each other. We've created a society, a very antisocial society, in that we're not having that one-on-one interaction anymore. Everything's done through a device. Everything is done through some form of electronic media, and it's become a very antisocial environment. And also really understand the impact it's going to have on our short-term and long-term health.
And when we think about creativity in a bigger way, as far as on a world scale, a conversation that we had, not during the interview, but a conversation we had prior, I think it was a phone call, we had discussed a TED Talk that was very inspirational to you.
Absolutely. That was a TED Talk. I was very, very much inspired by a TED Talk that I saw by a British professor called Sir Ken Robinson. And he challenges, his philosophy is why education is killing creativity. And it goes back to our education system. Our core education system is the only aspect of our learning that hasn't evolved. Everything around it has evolved. Technology has evolved. The way that we interact with product has evolved. The way that we use these new product innovations, we use these new product technologies have evolved. but our core education hasn't evolved. And that creativity is still relegated to the bottom tier in the curriculum. You know, we're still focused on these core subjects. And, you know, maybe it's time to reevaluate the way that we teach our children, you know, the next generation of designers, you know, and really focus on those strengths, really focus on those core competencies that may not be, you know, identified early on in their you know, their learning schedule.
And this is something that is important to you, not only because you're a designer and you're an innovator, but you're also a father.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's paramount. I mean, I know I've got twin boys, and obviously very, very different personalities. You know, and I can see how they interact with certain technologies in a very different way. But also, you know, how do we really embrace those personalities? I'm seeing it from a very biased perspective, but you know, if you know, expand on that across that entire demographic, how do we gauge, you know, how do we gauge these you know, these insights into what their passions are at a very early age? You know, they may not be passionate about mathematics, but they might be brilliant creatively. You know, and in that TED talk, you know, so Ken Robinson, he talks about this specific example of a young girl who had some, you know, I won't say learning difficulties, but she had problems with focusing at school. And at the time, she was basically put to one side and said, okay, you know, she's just got, you know, concentration issues. She can't concentrate on the task in front of her. What it turned out to be was that she had so much tapped in energy. She had this creative mind and she needed to exert this creativity, but she wasn't given the tools to do it. Turned out that this girl blossomed into one of the most famous dancers in history. She then turned into choreographing all of Lloyd Webber's material, and is world renowned. But had they not tapped into that creativity early on, who knows where she would be today?
Yes, definitely a need for society to recognize all different types of intelligence.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful, enlightening, and it's always a great conversation with you, Rich.
Thank you so much. Thank you for involving me in this session.